Okay, good morning, y'all. This is Ron. It is Saturday morning, a little after 10 a.m., so we'll get started with questions and or comments and see what we have. I want to probably go back into talking about Solomon for just a little bit, and we'll see if we have questions there. But first, let's just see if we have questions, period, about anything, questions or comments. Okay. If you will, I just want to maybe point out an observation I had on yesterday, which I thought was very interesting. Uh, Everybody jokes with me at work, the people that work around me, that I have meetings all the time. Ron's always having meetings in his area. He doesn't. Ron doesn't work anymore. He's always having meetings, and it made me take notice that people come over there and talk to me all the time. Uh, and I don't, invite them over. They just come over and talk, and which is fine with me. I really enjoy it. Uh, I had a conversation. With, I had a conversation yesterday on two separate occasions with two managers, and the conversation was pretty interesting because hello. Can you please mute your phones, please? Thank you. Uh, Both of them, and both of them being white guys, Europeans. And I'll tell you why I think that is important in a minute. But we're good friends, but with them being managers, I don't get to talk to them often. So unless it's something that I have a need for, or we never really talk. And it was just funny that they came and talked to me. But both of them are doing the same thing. Both of them have decided to leave America. And you never guess why. One says he's disgruntled with the church. The church doesn't know right and wrong anymore. And he's decided to move. And of all places, he's moving to Jamaica. His wife is from Jamaica. He met her at Clemson. And they found a church that they like in Jamaica. So he's not moving for a job. He's not moving for the money. He's moving because he found a church, which I thought was interesting. The other said something similar. He said, I'm not quite sure where we're going yet. He says we've targeted Belize and somewhere else he mentioned. He said, but I want to get my children out of this because America doesn't know right and wrong. He says the government runs the church. There is no separation. Instead of the church influencing the government runs the church. And he said that's not right, and I'm really sick of it. He said I'm tired of seeing things happen and nobody says or does anything. And he mentioned, several things that have happened in recent history that, the church did not address or did not say anything, but took the side of whatever the local or national government was taking. And he wants to get his family out here. And I thought, wow. Now, these two guys don't know each other like that. I mean, it's a small company. Of course, they know each other, but they're not friends in that way. And they don't hang out together. But it's funny to me that they both came to a similar conclusion. And I mentioned at the onset they were both white guys because I guess it kind of was something that I needed to hear because I thought the church had really the Southern Baptists particularly had really kind of just galvanized themselves against everything, but it seems that there are people out there that care. There are people out there that paying attention, that have a conscience, and whether or not you argue that their actions are right or wrong is not something I even given a lot of thought to. But the fact that they have decided to take an action, and I thought was very interesting. So, any thoughts or questions on that? Okay.
I would be interested to know how it affected you. What came to your mind first? Now I do have thoughts about it. However, I want to know what you felt first.
Well, as I prepare for anything, I was a little shocked, especially with the first guy. And the thing I always ask myself is, why did you need to hear this? And as I said, I kind of had negative thoughts about the church and the direction that the church is going in, and to hear them because one guy, the first guy, is a Jehovah's Witness, and the other one is a Baptist. And I was just in shock that they felt that way and had paid that close of attention to what was going on. And it made me wonder how many more people, maybe if I misjudged this, what else have I misjudged? That's what I originally thought.
When you say you misjudged, you mean you thought that they were staunch, quote-unquote, Christians?
Yes. Yes. With even with things that go on inside the company, you never see any pushback or things that are just could be done better, let's say, without getting into a lot of details.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think you were supposed to see it because you were supposed to talk about it today. And the reason being is that from two different sources came the same conclusion. And that conclusion is based upon right and wrong from two people who are steeped in each one of their churches and believed that what they had been taught, apparently, and started seeing that what they had been taught does not fit what they are seeing every day of their lives, which means that there are others who are experiencing the same thing. But more importantly than that, it was two Caucasian males. That's what makes it important. Makes it important to me anyway. Thank you.
Me as well, Pastor. That was the thing that I noticed too. I love enlightenment. I love things that illuminate me and show me things, and that was one of them. And it was also a opportunity to take a hold and grasp hope and see unity in it. One guy even said he knows, although it's upsetting to him, he knows that all the upheaval and all the chaos and all the stuff going on in Washington is a good thing. If it was smooth and everything was going well, then that would be bad. But the chaos is good. He just didn't know how it was going to conclude. I was like, wow, okay.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. It does sound familiar. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Are there any more questions and or comments on anything?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I yield.
No.
Do you think that they know that the white supremacy is ending or is dead, and that's why they're wanting to leave?
No, I don't think that at all.
Mm-mm.
I think that's part of what they're saying that is wrong with America.
Okay.
Because the church, the Caucasian Church, Southern Baptist in particular, supports what happened in Washington in terms of January 6th. And the government supports it. If we believe for a minute that the government did not support it, then why was nobody shot on the steps of the Capitol when they came in there? There have been African people, 100 of them would be dead, and the rest of them be in jail.
Mm-hmm.
So I see clearly what they are saying. But when you get white males talking like that and being serious about what they are saying, that means that the change that we have been talking about, I told you, is right in front of you. It's already here. Just embrace it.
Plus, Pastor, they're moving to countries with a lot of people of color.
Absolutely. Is that not what we've been talking about? The Africans have to bring the spiritual consciousness to the Caucasian. And the hardest one to reach is the Caucasian male. And look at what's happening. Would you agree, Audrey?
Yeah, I would. They feel like they need a place where they can find themselves, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
And the guide to help them find themselves spiritually is the African. Make no mistakes about it. When it talks about Jethro being the eyes in the wilderness, it's talking about Africans leading Africans through a wilderness that they don't know how to navigate. And if we have to lead each other through that wilderness because we don't know how to navigate it, then why is that so? It's so because we were kept in a cramped space. And when we are led to enlightenment, then it is incumbent upon us to enlighten those who have never been enlightened. Thank you.
Questions or comments, y'all? Give me a second. I'm writing something down.
Good morning, Ron.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Ron, as you talk about, in terms of these times of coming together brings enlightenment. I just wanted to share experience something similar, but I think it will all come together in terms of us appreciating the wisdom of Solomon and just appreciating the opportunity that we have to impact, hopefully positively, on those that sometimes we're challenged to communicate with. And I'll just use as an example, in terms of, this week, there were, some teenagers that were at the door entrance, of the recreation center, where, I have some time to spend in terms of working with young people. And these particular persons were actually, smoking, marijuana right in front of the entrance of the gate. And these were, young people that I've never, really seen before, because there's a school that's close by 8th and Diamond. And, my first thought when I approached them, and again, not looking at it from, a reactionary standpoint, but just try to think in terms of what does this mean. And I'm just trying to really look at it, as who I am. And so my first response was not to just say, well, this wrong, you shouldn't be, doing this. But I needed to think for a moment, Ron, and everybody, in terms of who I am and how do I approach this. And so when we talk about experiences that we all have with people, I'm trying to be really conscientious about my self consciousness and how to relate to them. So to make a long story short, I went up to the door. I didn't say anything at first, and then I said, let me think about it. I came back out. But what I said to them was, we'll be having a meeting shortly, and I'm going to need to ask if you can leave, or you're going to need to stop smoking in front of the entrance door.
Yeah.
I didn't get any negative response. The one guy say, okay, OG, I appreciate, you know what I mean? And so I realized when you talk about teachable moments or bringing enlightenment to a situation, I'm thankful for these calls, these sessions that we have, because all of us are going to be challenged with situations and circumstances that we face. And I think that when we operate in our highest self, when we can operate in our true self to bring some kind of communication to the table, I think that's a start. And so I don't want to really go off the subject of what was said earlier, but I just wanted to share that because I think that we all are growing through situations that we need to figure out a way how to open up the doors versus what's happening in the city now in terms of them closing recreation centers, in terms of them, starting to establish a lot of policies that's closing things versus being open in terms of how do we reach the heart and soul of those that need to be enlightened. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. Hopefully I didn't take you off the subject matter at hand, but I think we all are facing challenges, and I know that for the reason that we come together is for a time such as this. So thank you for letting me share those thoughts.
Thank you, George. Go ahead. I'm just going to say that leads us right into where I want to go. But go ahead, Pastor. If anybody wants to address that, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the OG. That's all. The current conversation you had is speaking to something, and the response was positive. And that is I've worked with rec centers most of my life, especially when I was in D.C. Neighborhood Planning Council was actually rec centers and teaching facilities in different parts of the city, especially in Southeast. And every time that we operate those centers and they were beginning to see positive movement and progress in communities, that's when they started closing them. They started defunding them. They talk about defunding the police, but all opportunities for the youth in the inner city, they are being defunded because if they are positive, having a positive effect on the community at large, not just a small portion, but the community at large, that's when the money is withdrawn. And this is a continuation of what started when they began to move jobs out of the inner city in order to foster behavior that was foreign to us, that's unbecoming. And now they're just doing it on a level where it affects you at a younger age. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else, questions or comments?
Good morning, everyone. One of the things or a couple of things that I'm hearing that's being said based on Mr. George's experience out of Philly, not just with young adults, just with people in general. Sometimes negative attention is better than no attention at all. And those young men that were smoking the reefer, thank you, in front of the rec center, maybe they were asking, will someone notice me? It's plausible you can look at it like that. I know I've done some things out here. I don't feel like no one notices me, heck, I'll do something crazy. Hey George, we see you. Okay, you acknowledge me, I'm good. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of what Ron was talking about, um, with the two European males, I'm really intrigued with why are they coming to you? Um, and in my little experience in life, um, when I operate in the less, I'm aiding humanity and I'm courting feminine energy at the same time. People who I would never get down with will come to me and say, "Hey, quick, let's go burn a cigarette. Let me process something." Um, and these are people who don't know I go by quick. They may have heard from someone else. Um, so that's interesting. So I'm as a suggestion to Ron or to anyone, when people are coming to us that we normally are not in rhythm with, it doesn't mean that we don't care for them. It just means our circles will never jive. Maybe how we conduct ourselves based upon energy, they see something in us. And it's almost like they seeking approval. Hey, man, I'm leaving the United States because I'm pissed off at the church. Maybe that dude is asking for your permission. I need you to validate, make sure it's plausible. And that's it right there. Thank you.
Appreciate it, George. For one thing, I meant to add that I don't. You guys know me. I don't talk about the church. If somebody asks me about scripture or something, I don't carry a cross or the Bible. I'm me. And you know, I work in a group of several work groups around me, but I'm the only male in the work group, which I love, by the way, and because we cut up and have a lot of fun. But everybody, the women call me the meeting place, but everybody wants to come over and talk to me, and it didn't dawn on me until one of them said something about it, and so yeah, I'll stop what I'm doing because I think it's rude. And there have been a couple of occasions I might say to you, hey, let me get you at the top of the hour. I'll go and break it top out. If I'm behind in something that needs to be done. But most of the time I stop what I'm doing and I listen. And we sit there and talk. And 99% of the time it has nothing to do with scripture or that type of thing. It just they just want to talk. So, I've come to embrace that as one of the it's one of the things that helped me, as you heard me say a couple of weeks ago. It helps me embrace the Mondays and the Tuesdays and the Wednesdays. I really give some thought now to being finding beauty in every day. And it's a shame I had to really concentrate on that, but I think it's going to come easier in time to not wake up in a bad mood because it's Monday or just Tuesday, but to always be in the now and appreciate where you are. And I think that's a part of it. So thank you. Okay. If there are no other thoughts or comments, I have a thought that that'll help me kind of tie in where we left off with Solomon a little bit anyway, and I hope this makes sense. I have a couple verses I want to tie together, and let's talk about it. I want to talk from Genesis chapter 1 and Revelations chapter 21. And again, it's 3 verses. In Genesis 1 and 2, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. That's Genesis 1 and 2. In Revelation chapter 21, the first verse says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there were no more seas. Okay. There is a oneness to heaven and earth. You don't see any comments about creation without them talking about heaven and earth. It's not saying the heaven or the earth, it's heaven and earth. The three things in those three verses that's consistent: heaven, the word earth, and water. And water. And let's take a look at that. Just like we've been taught that these are two separate things, and we've been taught to look at them that way. Just like we see God is being far away and not a part of us, or not who we are, and we have to pray and to that God that is far away. We even see the not the darkness. We even see adversarial thoughts as being something that comes in us and takes over us. So we are this separate entity that lives here on earth that seems to be powerless to these two things. And so that's how we've lived. That's how we worship. Religion has taught us who we are, and that is our being. The funny thing to me is these verses, one starts in Genesis and the other in Revelation. What is in between? What is in between is man. What is in between is what makes them all one. What's in between is what brings about the unity, and shows you that there is no separation. As we learned when we looked at good and evil, rightness and unrightness, there is no separation. One has to exist to define the other. You don't become ripened unless you are first unripened. So just as a piece of fruit, as human beings, we go through those stages of our lives every day. And just because I might be ripened in one area, I'm unripened in another. As I mentioned to you at the onset, the story of the two guys coming to me and it opening my eyes to seeing a part of man that I did not think existed. I did not think that people cared or were listening or paying attention to what. So in that area of my life, I was unripened. So I was enlightened by what was said to me, and I fully supported their actions, and I wished them well on their journeys. And that's what I told them. You are on a journey, and I wish you well. I hope you seek the enlightenment. I hope you find the enlightenment that you're seeking. But when you look at this and pay close attention to what is being said in Genesis here, there are a couple of things that I myself have missed anyway. One, these descriptions talk more of the heavens than they do the earth. These descriptions talk more of the heavens than they do the earth, and it talks about the blending of the two. Like, for example, science have known for some time that light, Light, can be measured in wave and in particles. Science has known that, and I think that is what the water represents. The water that it speaks of is very prominent in this creation story. Even in Revelation, it is saying that all the enlightenment that you have been seeking, everything that you have sought to know, you are going to know. That's why there's no more water. There is no more enlightenment for you to seek once you reach this point. Once you have created, because you are the creator of the new heaven and the new earth. Okay, so when you look at this in Genesis 1 and they talk about what is formless and what is void, it goes back to what we've been saying. All of this is showing an interwoven dance between what is ripened, what is not what is ripened, right? What is light, what is dark, what is known, what is unknown. So when it talks about this and and the earth being the particle part, the earth being that part that is manifest, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute why that is so important. The heavens being the vibrational part, the part where we say that resonates with me. We are in heaven in that particular place in our lives, and whatever is being revealed to us, whatever place of enlightenment we're in. So when this talks about this, it's showing an interwoven dance between heaven and earth and what that means. And you see that is a place of awareness. The manifestation of it is extremely important, but it is an immature part. It is talking about the immature part of man, where the earthly part, until we get to the end, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But any questions or comments so far? So when you look at this thing and you see, I'm saying that the interwoven parts of this, the parts that are seen and the parts that are unseen dance together. So you look at it, for example, and you talk about, let's take the word curse. We've been taught that is a bad word, but you see it right here playing out. A curse is something that is hidden or is covered over. The interwoven part of the heaven and earth defines that. You know, as things are uncovered to you, as you submit yourself to understanding truth. So as you move away from the earthly principles and from the earthly, the particle, the manifestation of things, as you move to a deeper place of awareness, as you come to find your spiritual self and your soulful self, and as that physical person starts to die off and starts to be revealed to you in a different way, and you see this thing, you see that a curse is not a bad thing. Things are being uncovered to you as you are asking for more and for more and for more. And as you are becoming a spiritual being, more is being uncovered to you. Now let's talk about the bad part of a curse. Let's talk about that. When I mentioned the earth is the immature part of man, the earth being that part of you that is the physical manifestation, those particles. And you look at that and you say, for example, let's go to the term where God says to them, once you do this thing, your eyes will be wide open. Well, what did they see? What did they see? Because it wasn't until man becomes involved in this thing that good and evil plays a part. Up until then, it's light and darkness. But when you bring man into it, you start talking about good and evil. In other words, what is ripened and what is unripened. So what did he see? He sees the two extremes. He sees the two extremes, and at that point, you have decisions to make. You have decisions to make as to what direction you want to go in. So the one extreme is when you may allow, you don't seek to uncover truth, but you may allow those thoughts to take you in the opposite direction, meaning that you allow those animalistic thoughts to take over, and you become a killer, you become a rapist, you become someone who is overtaken by the extremeness of what evil is known to in the earth. When evilness was designed to talk about being unripened, you become the extreme of that. So the place of balance is where we're all trying to get. So you're becoming balanced, and that is what this journey is all about. Meaning, if you look at an Abraham, for example, Abraham could have gone in any direction. His father was a man who was extremely religious, but Abraham is not about a man. It is about a man who finds, it is about each and every one of us who finds his balance, and his balance is found in Sarah. Sarah brings him his balance, but not to see them as two separate people. You see that as the masculine and feminine energy coming together to be one. And the balance means that there may be times and in certain situations where I take the dominant role and where my feminine energy takes the dominant role. So the balance is I become whatever I need to be in order to see enlightenment, in order to become enlightenment. So I start my journey. And that's what I meant to them, the men that came to me. Start your journey. This is a new opportunity for you. Start this journey, and it is going to take you to enlightenment because that's what you're seeking. It cannot fail. So when you look at that, when you pair that, or even look at the journey that Job took, Job and Solomon have more in common than you think. Job is not about a man who ends up or losing everything he has, who has much and loses everything he has. Job is that part of you that looks and sees that I have this, I have that, I have all these things. My children are happy. My children have homes. My children are extremely close. They have great friends. I have all these things in my life. But just like Solomon, there's more. There's something more. So that thought and that recognition that there's something more comes from the soul. There is something in you that is not woven, bringing all this together. There's still a void there that you're feeling, and you're trying to fill that. So the emergence of God coming in and on Job was not just by happenstance. That is an invitation. That is an invitation. It is no different than what Pastor said at the onset. What are you willing to do to change? Well, I give up my free will. I do this. What is the more? I will do anything to get this. That is what you see in the book of Job. So he brings the tool. He brings the adversarial thoughts, but not to test Job so much as to show him who he is. So the cursing of his wife, he loses his balance. And then he goes through and all those things that are dear to him, all those barns, all those houses, all those children, all those things he shows, I am willing to die. I'm willing to let these things die. And the death of his children is showing that the way I see my children, I had them ahead of God. The way that I saw all these possessions, I had them aware of God, ahead of God, and all of that has to die. All of that has to disappear out of my mind as I am recreating this heaven and earth, which is me. Right. So yeah.
Question.
Is this making sense?
Yeah, when you talk about Job, right?
Yes.
And all that, as it is written, he lost was really, as you said, he had placed him before the Creator, and all that had to die within him. It was not a birth of children that he was granted after he realized who he is. It was him putting them in the right place in relationship to the Creator, meaning that he kept them in the place of being his children, and they were not in the place of his, they were not the object of his worship, if that makes any sense.
Yes, sir. It does. It does. Thank you.
When you talk about something dawned on me, when you talked about light and darkness and how light and darkness existed before men. And when men were introduced, what came into play was good and evil, or ripeness and unripeness. I see something, I think, in that. The light and darkness has always existed. And darkness was never intended to be viewed as something bad or scary. Darkness are those things which men are unaware of. Light are those principles that men are aware of. So when we're talking about coming out of the darkness into the light, we're not talking about coming from prison to the church. We're talking about coming out of darkness into light. We are talking about coming from a world of the unknown to a place of awareness. When man was introduced, this idea of good and evil, or ripeness, unripeness, better stated as functionality and dysfunctionality. This good and evil did not exist beforehand because there was no one that had been created in the image of Elohim. Once there was an image of Elohim created, in order for that image to be as its creator is, it had to know the difference between functionality and dysfunctionality in order to find itself. When it, even in a place of functionality, is still in the place of the unknown until it begins to search for itself and become enlightened as to its existence and for what purpose. The evilness or the unripeness or the dysfunctionality is when you look at these scriptures literally and embrace them as being a message for the physical world, as opposed to being a direction, as opposed to them being directions that are given in order to be functional in the material world. And when we become functional in the material world, it is at juncture that we begin to realize that there's so much unknown, there's so much darkness, there's so much wisdom to be understood. And when we make our efforts to understand that wisdom, it is then that we begin to move from the darkness of the womb, that is a place where we cannot really see or experience that much because we don't understand it, to the light of birth, where we are able to see what everything means, or what those things that were unknown to us, what they mean and how they can be utilized for the benefit of humanity. And at that point, light and darkness are embraced as something magnificent. And and we no longer see darkness as evilness or unripeness. We see it for what it really is. That makes sense?
It does.
Makes a lot of. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In darkness, like you said, which is the unknown, and it's not a bad thing. It's nothing bad about darkness. Is that where we find ourselves? Is that where we learn who we are when we in darkness?
Yes, and we know that too, because we make statements like, "Don't keep me in the dark," right? Keeping you in the dark doesn't mean something bad. Keeping you in the dark means that you don't understand something. Enlighten me. Don't keep me in the dark about this. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's talking about. That is the depth of our divinity that we pass along as being an adage, or we pass it along as being something that that is a simply cultural thing that we say. It really isn't. It is a divine thing that we say. Don't keep us in the dark. Darkness did not become a bad thing until dark people were considered to be less than. This whole concept of darkness, if you look at Webster's dictionary, I have a first edition of Webster's dictionary. And if you look at that dictionary, from that point forward, you will see that darkness or black is always something negative. However, if you predate that, you will find that darkness, that blackness, both are the same, have no identification in regards to people, but it has a deep-seated message in it that says, this is what you need to understand. Be still and know that you are Elohim. And then you will begin to decipher the wisdom, the darkness around you. And that way, not only will you be enlightened, you become the light. You are the light that's not placed on the bushel basket. You are the light that's willing to speak the truth of enlightenment without regard to the consequences of it. You are, when you begin to do that, that is when those who do not understand the difference between darkness and evil, they are the ones who castigate you. They are the ones who say disparaging things about you. They are the ones who isolate themselves from you because they don't understand and they don't desire to. And the very thing that they are holding on to in those settings is not darkness at all. What they are holding on to is unripeness, evilness. That's what they're holding on to. And the extreme of that is the murder of someone's character. It's the physical murder of someone. All of these things are unripeness. They're not darkness. In darkness, there's only wisdom. And the reason that there are especially African men who call themselves Moors and all these other things that they don't understand, speak as females being the source of darkness. They're right and they're wrong. They're wrong because that when they reference females as being that source of darkness, they're referencing Eve, and they're saying that evilness was brought into the earth by that. They're right in that feminine energy is wisdom, and they don't understand the difference between that wisdom and that evilness. Feminine energy is not evil, it's not unripened. It represents wisdom, and that masculine energy represents the understanding that comes out of that wisdom. There is no masculinity if there is no femininity. And the reason the world is so corrupt is because there has been a separation between the masculine and the feminine. We have created walls between the masculine and the feminine, and those walls are kept up and in place based upon finances, brute strength, and total ignorance. All of these things are involved in our understandings of the difference between darkness and evil, and light and ripeness. Darkness and light, again, darkness and light, understanding and wisdom has always been present. The introduction of the man was for the man to know the difference between the two. And the way he does that is by becoming ripened. Ripeness is your search to understand the darkness. Unripeness is your not caring about either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron, I got one more question.
Okay.
Why didn't the darkness comprehend the light? Did I miss that? Because so much has been said, but I always wonder why the darkness couldn't comprehend the light.
I think we should take another look at that before we come to the conclusion that the darkness did not understand the light.
Yeah.
What I'm saying in essence is this. Is the word that's translated as darkness, should it have been that?
Or comprehend.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So I think we
So,
need to.
yeah. I'm sorry, Pastor. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm done. I just said I think we need to take another look at that before we come to any conclusions about it. That's all.
Are you saying it's a mistranslation, Pastor, you said?
Everything pretty much is a mistranslation.
Because it doesn't make sense. I mean, it just don't line. It's just not flowing. So, okay. Thank you.
Well, there has to be another party, a third party, if you will, to understand the difference between what's light and darkness. And in other words, there's more apart from light and darkness that must understand it's the existence of both in order to balance both. So the implication to me is that's the Elohim part of who we are, that we have an opportunity to understand the difference between light and darkness. But that part of us that does not, that's more physical in nature, that's more animalistic in nature, that refuses to know who we truly are, the implication to me is that part of us is that which does not understand the difference between darkness and light. Otherwise, if we really did, we would function as the enlightened one. And that seems kind of esoteric, but it just seems like there's another party apart from those two adjectives or those two forms, if you will, that stand to bring it together and to balance it.
And isn't that darkness melanin that they're talking about? Am I wrong with that? Or is it melanin?
No. Melanin is life itself. Melanin is the source of life. It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth. And the physical manifestation of a spiritual truth, what is the truth about darkness? Darkness is wisdom. And the manifestation of that wisdom is seen in the light that comes from melanin. It says that, but go ahead, I'm sorry. Did that make sense, Evelyn?
I'm processing. And I'm listening.
Okay.
I love Barbara's explanation. That her explanation makes sense to you, Evelyn. I like that.
It sounds like there's something that happened before then. I'm seeing that something like there's something that happened before in the beginning, if that makes sense. Because it's like it's jumping. I don't know what to say, but it just seems like there's something that happened before what we're reading on the page. But yeah, I'm processing. Thank you.
Let me can I show you from this perspective, and this is where I was going with this. Every one of us is a Job. Every one of us is a Solomon. Every one of us is an Abraham. And we are, the dance that we're doing called life is the interwoven light and darkness that we're trying to recover. And as we talked about what a curse is, the curse is not a bad thing. There's nothing in the scripture that is bad. It is what we do with it, is whether or not we use it as a tool or a weapon that makes it such. So using a curse, the bad part for a righteous man in a curse is he has to live with who he is until he recognizes who he is. He has to live with that. As he becomes enlightened and he has these aha moments, then as things are revealed to him, he becomes the much more. But until then, he has to live with just being a mere man. That's the worst that it would be, unless he sets his heart to be the extreme and to use it as a tool to bring harm to people, or to use it as greed or selfishness. And then it becomes much, much more. And that much, much more is where we get our definition of curse for that the world has. But listen to this. This was interesting to me. The word Bereshit talks about, when you break down the letters of it, it talks about something that is happening in principle. It hasn't happened yet. It has the power to, but it is not manifested. It is something that is not seen yet. So when we say, I remember when I first got a glimpse of this some years ago, when Kathy was teaching from what the boy name? George quoted the book of it last week. And when he cried out and God said, now that you cried out, I know what I see this and I can do what I do. But it is another example of it is when Pastor said these things already happened. These things already happened. And when we move to the enlightened part of us, that we see things from that perspective, we will see that they already happened. The sight, the difference is the sight. The sight in I mentioned the water being particles and waves. The sight is, from the heavenly perspective, your sight is in vibrations. It's in feelings. It's in emotions. It resonates with me. Those become the tools of it. Those tools become weapons when those feelings and emotion turn to rage and anger and revenge, and lead you in that direction. So if you can see this and understand it, as we unravel who we are and understand this dance and what we're made of, that we are as much heavenly as we are earthly. In fact, more so, because we're more water than we are physical substance. So when we embrace that and start to see that and our vision changes, then you see the change that we talk about. We feel it. And as the example I love that George gave at the onset, talking about the young men, when we learn that we are the light of the world, I am the illumination of everything that is godly, that is Elohim, and the thing that I enlighten myself on, as I enlighten myself, the manifestation of it is what I become an exterior. So people see that my countenance has changed. People see that I act a certain way. People see that my words have changed. And that is what invites me to be. People say I'm the meeting place. I'm the meeting place. I don't have a title. But people make a point to come to me and say good morning in the mornings. Recognize that now. I didn't always. So the manifestation of that is being the light of the world, is the change starts on the inside as you become more soulful and less earthly. That transformation is what is seen on the outside. And as people come to you and as they change, and what happens is their rhythm becomes in a part of your rhythm, and the vibrations that you feel, they start to feel, and then they're on a different journey as well. So it truly starts with self, and the recognizing that the things, the changes that we see, we see them by recognizing who we are. And as Pastor said, embracing the light and the darkness, because it is only gain when you recognize the darkness, that there is so much more that I don't know. There is so much more that I am that I don't even recognize yet. And I changed the world by that. And I was going through, we talked about Job, we talked about Abraham, and the same with Solomon. The beauty to me, or one of the beauties anyway, in Solomon is what he could see. That I've looked at dancing, I've looked at women, I've looked at song, I've built all this stuff, I planned, and I've been looking for fulfillment in all of it. I plant all these vineyards, I plant all these gardens, I've done everything in the earth that a man could do, and there's still something not there. Where must I search next? Where do I go with this? So every one of these characteristics represent all of us. Represent all of us. And these biblical stories is nothing more than autobiographies of a righteous man, a righteous soul, and it doesn't change. The name might be Audrey, the name might be Barbara, the name might be James, but it doesn't change. The soul doesn't change. And your journey is your journey because of your experiences, but the soul doesn't change. Each and every one of us are trying to turn our darkness into light. And as we become enlightenment, we enlighten others, and we hunger for more and more and more.
And Ron,
Question? Yes, sir.
Ron, and as you're speaking, looking at Genesis, the first 3 chapters, I think something that, could be a comparison is looking at the hidden womb, of the cosmic, black womb. And I say that in terms of the woman who births a child. You talk about coming out of darkness into light. But when we look at all of the wonderful, transformation that takes place in that process, it all comes out of the eternal waters. But being able to see the manifestation, of the, of the placenta, you know what I mean, in terms of that womb, that hole. But I look at verse number 2 as that process that I can see it from the scriptures actually manifesting in the reality of birth. So I think that, again, the birth of a child, and looking at Genesis 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see darkness, coming out of darkness into light. So I think that's just something that hit me, when you spoke about waters. I'm done.
Yeah, I see the same thing, George, and my comparison was in verse 9, because out of all of this, if you see verses 1 through 8, if you can see the earth, and the earth, it doesn't appear in the form that we know it as. It doesn't, the waters does not give birth until verse 9. It's describing a birth. When the land appears. So when we look at this and pull it all in spiritually, you get a totally different concept of what we've been taught to this meet. Go ahead, Pastor, please.
Simply going to say that prior to that, heaven and earth are spoken of conceptually, and what I see in that is a precursor to bringing earth to a place of making it a material place, with coming from enlightenment, heaven, Shamayim, and prior to what you are describing as the birth, it was still conceptually. It was in the mind of the Creator. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
I also think I see it, and I'd like to address it in a moment if I can. The question that Evelyn raised about the darkness not comprehending the light. I think I understand that. Go ahead. We'll get to that later.
No, I'm at a stopping point. I'm pretty much saw that the heaven and the earth thing, and there is no separation. And I guess we could probably talk on that for quite a while, but I was just hoping that generated some conversation as we saw that and kind of unravel it, because everything in between in the what we call the scriptures, although it's talking about that, or what that means.
You
Yeah.
You know how you see the smoke coming from a chimney, and you see it bellowing out thick, and then you watch it all the way up, you look all the way up until where it disappears, right? Even the end of that, at the place of disappearing from the visible eye, that smoke is still connected to the thickness of the smoke coming out that chimney. Am I right?
Correct.
So the darkness that's coming out of that chimney, that smoke, that's heavy billowing out of that chimney, is the earth. And where you cannot see it anymore is heaven. However, if you follow it from the darkest point all the way up to where you can't see it, there is a residual that you can see to the point where you can't see it anymore. So if you reverse that, if you see that where you can't see it anymore as being heaven, enlightenment, and as that enlightenment moves to the narrowness of that chimney, it condenses and it becomes thicker, and you can see it, and it's a material thing. So if we were to reverse it and think about the concept of heaven and earth, then would it not be that the tentacles of the portion that we cannot see are still there, which means that it is impossible to separate the heavens from the earth or the earth from the heavens. It's impossible to do that, regardless of how we mistreat the earth itself or each other, for that matter. Those tentacles are still there. And through those tentacles are flowing life itself. However, we have chosen what we want life to be in this space and neglect to accept life for what it really is. And as a result of that, the material world that we live in, we go deeper and deeper into that chimney and become more and more condensed in being more dense. Gives us the idea that there is no connection to the invisible, to the spiritual, until we die. And as a result, we end up with animalistic thoughts. We end up with religious beliefs that has no basis in the reality of enlightenment. That's what we are combating right now. We are making every effort to bring into the minds and hearts of men that regardless of where you are in this material world or who you think you are in this material world, you are still spiritual, because the tentacles of spirituality are always there. Otherwise, the body would not exist in the form that it does. Because when someone is murder. The reality of it is this: they have been forced to exit the body. So if that is the case, then it is impossible for us to even give thought to the idea that there is a difference or a separation between heaven and earth. Does that make sense?
I think that is a brilliant comparison. I love that. I love that. To show you where I am with that, what I saw is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I see our journey as a place of when we move to a place where we swap those worlds as being upside down, and what is spiritual become the significant place of where we live, and what is earthly becomes a place where we never are free of, but we always go and manifest ourselves to others. So you become the manifestation in the earth of what you are spiritually. You just get your comfort place, and you become so comfortable in your spiritual realm. But it is our desire to flip those upside down. Instead of seeing earth first, you see the earth, see the heavens first, and that becomes your abode.
The sages say that the physical is the secret hiding place of the spiritual. Well, what secret is something simply that's not known, that's not understood? And so what you all have just been saying is that the physical is necessary. It's necessary for mankind right now. And what we've been trying to say all along as well is that enlightenment or uncovering of truth, uncovering of spirituality, or as you just said, we need to become aware of who we are and live from that perspective rather than the physical. Because if the physical is the secret hiding place of the spiritual, when we get to the point where we understand that spiritual essence and aspect of who we are, the hiding place is no longer the necessity of the hiding place. Is not necessarily the primary thing anymore, because why hide your dollars in a jar when you don't need the jar anymore? Or why hide your wine in the vessel if you don't need the vessel anymore? Is the point I'm trying to make. And it helps me understand. Thank you for the discussion from everyone, because it's helped me understand even more so what it means when it says the physical is the secret hiding place of the spiritual. It is the secret hiding place until it's not, until we uncover it, until we become aware of it. It's not a secret anymore.
I love it. I love it. I love when everybody comes together with this. This is beautiful. Anyone else? Is it making sense, y'all? You see the connection. We are connected to everything. Everything is us. Everything is us. And we are moving in the right direction. We are understanding who we are. We're understanding the concepts and the principles of living the life that we're seeking to live with, and freeing ourselves from religious constrictions and the thou shalt nots, and enlightening others by doing so. So you are moving to a place where we are not only feeling the rhythms and the vibrations, but you are becoming the rhythms and the vibrations. You are helping others to see that the particles, the things that are physical, are not needed as we once thought they were. You are the rhythm and the vibration. So this is and there's a lot more here that still hasn't been revealed. It kind of opens up Genesis to me a little bit more. Questions or comments? Pastor, you had a part you wanted to get into? Hello?
Yeah, I want to revisit what Evelyn said and how Barbara responded. I think that when Barbara was talking, figured this, and I went to the Bible, went back to John to look at it. And if I may, will you indulge me for a moment with the reading of a few of these verses? It says that in John, the first chapter, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being by Him, and apart from Him, nothing came into being that has come into being. I don't want to deal with the Him yet. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. In Him was the life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it or did not have a mental understanding of it. Now, then it says, there came a man sent from God whose name was John. He came for a witness, that he might bear witness of the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came that he might bear witness of the light. Now, if the light is the life of men, and he speaks about the light shining in the midst of the darkness did not understand it, then is it not speaking to the man who the life is in? He does not understand the wisdom that brought him into existence. He doesn't comprehend it, even though his life is light itself. And because he does not understand it, then John came as a witness. John came as one to introduce someone who would show who would be able to teach us how to understand the life that's in us, or understand the wisdom that comes to that we are created with, and understand how this light is our life, which is saying that the understanding of wisdom is your lifeline. Prior to your understanding of the wisdom, when you are in darkness, when you are unaware of the wisdom and what it means, then you are in the throes of religion, or a mind that is a reprobate mind. However, there is always someone who Elohim brings in your presence, who is able to bring understanding of what's in you and how you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and your oneness with the one who created you. Because until that happens, we are living in a world that has ebbs and flows between unripeness and ripeness, simply because we don't understand the wisdom. And when the understanding of that wisdom is brought to our minds, then it begins to seep into our soul. And at that point, we become one with the light. And becoming one with the light simply means that you are willing, you are desirous of embracing that which you do not understand for the purpose of understanding it. Does that make sense? And I am soliciting help with this. And Barbara Jean, is that along the lines that you were talking about?
Yes, sir. That's precisely similar to what I was talking about.
Does that help you, Evelyn?
It does, and I'm thinking you guys are sounding like Solomon, just giving us wisdom and opening up layers of what you're talking about. So, yeah, everything, like Barbara said, everything what everyone is saying is so enlightening, and yeah, I'm learning and processing, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else with a question or comment? I suppose, Ron, you're supposed to be saying that, right?
No, go ahead. It made sense to me. I like it. It just got me to thinking. I'm just trying to bring it back to Genesis. But yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about.
See, it says the true light was coming into the world to enlighten every man. But I don't see the him as being Jesus anymore. I see the him as being you, who have embraced the wisdom, even though you don't understand it. The light that you have come to understand is what causes it to resonate within you. Your desire causes it to resonate. If you did not desire a true understanding, then that it would not resonate with you. For example, when we at times would teach, make an attempt at least to teach other ministers or teachers or the people, they rejected it without even considering it because it was not something they were familiar with. And 99% of them rejected it because it didn't resonate, and it did not resonate because they didn't want it. I remember teaching in the midst of some Caucasian preachers, and they said to me that God does not hear the prayer of a sinner. And I said to them, that's not true. That's not what the scripture said. The Pharisees said that. And they argued with me. And one of the Caucasian ministers found the scripture and read it to them, and they still rejected it. And there was no sense of them, of it resonating with them. Their resistance was predicated on what they had been told to believe. And there was nothing about their soul that was willing to accept it. They would not even allow their minds to even consider it because of the source of it. That is no different than the African ministers and teachers that we have made an attempt to explain things to, and they rejected it the same way. However, there were some who didn't reject it, but they would not teach it. They did not want to know it. When they had questions, they would call for answers, but they would not publicly make any statements about the reality of it. They simply wanted something to preach about as opposed to live by. That's what I see in the hymn. The hymn is you. The hymn is me. The hymn is us who are seeking to understand this light and we are the enlightenment of men. And honestly, when it talks about the world being made by him, the world is being made by us. This earth is being brought into compliance with spirituality by us. So we are the ones who are molding this world. And that world speaks about diversity. We have the obligation to bring diversity to a place where it is no longer diverse, to bring diversity to a place where it is one. And the diversity of which I speak is not linguistic. It's not cultural. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the diversity in terms of groups of people, Caucasians, Japanese, Chinese, Africans, etc. This diversity, we are obligated to bring this diversity to a place where it sees itself as one. And the unicity of it has absolutely nothing to do with what the external portions look like or how we function culturally. An oak tree is different than a spruce tree or a pine tree. However, if that oak tree is diseased, it sends out a chemical message to every tree around it without regard to what type of tree it is, warning it, making it aware of the danger that's present. If that happens with trees, then why does it not happen with us? It doesn't, because we were created to be adversarial to ourselves. If we were not adversarial to ourselves, we would not come to a place of accepting that we are Elohim. That battle is necessary for us to be as Elohim is, for us to be who we were created to be, image and likeness. If we had been made exactly like Elohim and everything was given to us in terms of our being able to avoid the adversities that we face, then would we really be as Elohim without having to make a decision to be who we were created to be? When that happens, that gives us all the power that's necessary to bring Earth into compliance with enlightenment. We are the light of the world. We are the enlightenment to everything that sees itself as being diverse to each other. Questions, comments? Thank you.
When you were talking, you reminded me of something at Mount Sinai. God says to Moses, go and see about your people. And you look at that, and what did God recognize? What did God see? God would give Moses instructions, and Moses would take it to the people. So Moses had become the voice of God. He had become the word of God. And the people gave him reverence to that. They honored that. So when you talk about the hymn, truth gives you that place, and it elevates you from being human to that being the voice of being the oneness of God. So the creating part of you becomes important, and it becomes evident. So that's just something I thought of when you were talking about that piece of scripture.
I can see that.
Anyone else? I certainly hope this all made sense. One of the things I'm sorry, was someone else going to speak?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ron. Yeah, I was just going to say, it definitely makes sense. And I think, Pastor Richard, when you just spoke about the importance of if you are seeking the truth, you know what I mean, then we need to be open. And I think that as we open ourselves up to truly appreciate the creation stories, because we know that there's various creation stories, but if we can go back to, the beginning, we can go back to origin and just be open in terms of just being able to see that if everything originally started at this particular point, then how do we now see it from the truth and now being able to appreciate the journey that we need to travel on. And I think that again, if it all, started, at a particular point, then I know that this has truly have empowered me because part of this journey is to go to beginning. So as we continue to, have this, conversation and this discussion and this teaching, it's really been powerful because it all was a beginning point. And if that was in Africa, if that was a particular story, then I think it opens us all up to enlightenment. I'm done, Ron.
Hey, George, are you moving around?
Yeah, I'm still now. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay.
George, when you were talking, and coupled with what Ron said, I had a flash, and that flash was this: with the only people who are referred to as being indigenous.
Okay. Both of you guys are cutting out now. Is this?
Am I cutting out? I run out because George didn't cut out to me when he.
Ron, they're clear to me as well.
They're clear.
Is it my phone?
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think so.
Okay. Hey, are you moving around?
I'm seated. So
Right.
I'm the only one that's having trouble.
Yep.
Okay.
Are we clear now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
When you guys were speaking, something came to me a flash that only indigenous people, only people of color called indigenous people. But that was not the main thing. The main thing that came to me is this: that all indigenous people, all people of color, has always had the mind, the eyes, the soul of our Creator in its midst. They call them medicine men. They call them voodoo doctors, and voodoo means genius, of course. They call them shamans. All of these names were given, but all of them had the same responsibility. And that responsibility was in the image of God in the midst of the people. Speaking to the people as the voice of the Creator. Would you mute your phone, please? We found ourselves rejecting the reality of being God only when we were told that it is impossible for you to be God. You just go die and go to heaven to live with God. I wonder where that came from. If you go back to the roots of Catholicism and the influence of Catholicism even on Islam, you will find that prior to that, everyone on this earth believed who they were created to be. And that is the reason it was so easy to live with being one with the earth itself, because there is no separation between heaven and earth, as there is no separation between your physical body and your spiritual you. You are one with it. So what I'm saying in essence is this. When we go back to the basics, what we see is that we've always known that we are Elohim. And we always held to that until we were forced to believe something that was not true, that came from people who did not know what truth was, that came from people who were so disconnected from spirituality until no religion ever came from their midst, other than the bastardizing of what truth is. Thank you. Comments? Questions?
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Does to me.
And we must be comfortable with the reality of that. We cannot be uncomfortable with speaking the truth. See, this is the thing. We cannot pretend to be comfortable with speaking the truth only when it's understanding what's being written in the scriptures and not speaking the truth about our existence in this earth and how things got there where they are, and the need for us to embrace our essence in terms of being Elohim with every fiber of our being. And I'm not just talking about our physical being, but also our spiritual essence. Our spiritual essence doesn't change. I do believe that the struggle with holding on to being God, holding on to being Elohim, is a physical, material thing, because it has been driven into our minds, and we have been whipped into believing that whatever interpretation we get of the scriptures from the European enslaver is the truth, and nothing else can be the truth. And we refrain from lying, being expressive of the origin of the lie, because we have been beaten over the head with playing the race card, when this has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with truth. And anyone who says that you are playing the race card, they are the one who's doing it. It's called projection. They are projecting to you that you are less than them. If they were comfortable with the truth, there would be no projection that you are less than. Don't ever let anyone, regardless of who they are, how much power they purport to have, do not allow them to make you feel uncomfortable or less than simply by saying you are playing the race card. You are not. You are playing the card of truth, the card of reality. And there are people who are perpetuators of racism and lies who are very uncomfortable with it, and they try to shift that to you. And with that, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else questions or comments? Okay, I think we've had we've covered a lot of ground today. A lot has been said, and I encourage you, if you have questions and or comments, let's get back tomorrow at 11 a.m. and we'll finish this discussion.
Ron?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a quick question? I
Of
was trying to
course.
get it in the beginning, but the conversation kind of went a different way. I just wondered if anybody had any thoughts about the hurricane and the fact that it impacted South Carolina. Florida and South Carolina. Any thoughts on that?
Of course. Ron, tell her what your thoughts are.
my heart
Well,
went out to Puerto
it's
Rico.
just interesting that we haven't had a hurricane in South Carolina in a long time, but now here it is.
Audrey, I really believe that the way the hurricane came into Florida, in particular, and crisscrossed Florida, it had everything to do with the energy in Florida, especially with the size of it. It was the largest hurricane ever to hit Florida. And the idea that it brushed Georgia and hit South Carolina, I think is extremely important to look at where it hit South Carolina. And it didn't just brush the coast, but it had a very light effect in Charleston, between Georgetown and Myrtle Beach. The pearl of South Carolina is Myrtle Beach. And I think that it did what it did to get our attention. It was supposed to come through the heart of South Carolina. And I was talking to someone before it got near South Carolina. And I said to them, not to worry. This is not going to happen the way that they're predicting it. It's going to move further east. And we'll get some rain, but it's not going to be the damage that was in Florida. That night, when I went to bed, I dreamed about that hurricane coming to South Carolina and the struggle. It was like I could see myself pushing it off the shore and it resisting it. And it came right up the edge of the shore. And I'm not telling you something that I had not spoken with somebody about it before it happened. But I think it's a message. I really think it's a message. The people who are the chieftains of racism, the loudest voices of racism are in Florida, Donald Trump and DeSantis. And I do believe that had a lot to do with it. DeSantis being the person who voted against and pushed a bill to deny assistance to New Jersey and New York when Sandy hit, who felt like people should stand on their own 2 feet and states should take care of their own people without the assistance of the federal government, all of a sudden needs more assistance than any state in the country has ever needed, even with Katrina. So I think it's a message to those who are listening. There is a cleansing, and that cleansing cannot come before that which is filthy is destroyed. So now the rebuilding of Florida is going to be, or is rather, is a spiritual message of the rebuilding of humanity, bringing this nation into being and destroying the empire that it once was. That's my take. That's what I see. Thank you.
The other thing that I see in that is the fact that it leveled the field for those the haves and the have-nots, in a sense. The haves, the more affluent area of Fort Myers and Naples and that area in there are basically peopled by folk who can afford to be in that area, who can afford waterfronts, etc. On the other hand, you have Puerto Rico, which is an island, which is surrounded by water. However, it's peopled mostly by people of color. And the response to both of these areas from the government and from all of us, really. Says a lot about who we are. So I believe that lots of resources are going to be poured into Florida. They will argue that, well, in Puerto Rico we can't pour those resources because of infrastructure issues. Well, then the solution is clear. Deal with the infrastructure issues so that we can afford to be helpful and supportive when it's needed in times like these, even for Puerto Rico. So it shows the disparity, I think, between the haves and the have-nots. But the flood equalized those disparities because people who once had homes and are now homeless, who had businesses, no longer have businesses. And so I trust that what's going to be seen from that is the bigger picture of our need to support each other regardless of what we have or what we don't have, what our skin tone is or what it is not. Thanks.
I agree with you, Barbara. I mean, it does offer a real contrast. And I think, Barbara, if you look at the contrast between Puerto Rico and Houston during the time of Trump and how he just abandoned Puerto Rico and they authorized the money, but they never sent it. They only sent enough to justify sending something, but not everything that was authorized to be sent. And the contractors that they sent in were thieves. Now, we have a different administration. The question becomes, how are they going to deal with Puerto Rico now in relationship to how they deal with Florida? One of the things that I noticed about Florida is this. There are people who are in Florida who lived in those places, and they had enough money to purchase those homes. Some of them did not have flood insurance. They had enough money to do that, but their retirement income was enough to sustain them once they purchased a home. But now to rebuild something there is a whole new ball game. So, I think that it's going to be interesting to watch how the government subsidizes Florida versus subsidizing Puerto Rico. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, Bob. Oh, I'm done.
And with that, with the details of what you and Robert laid out, I see it as an opportunity for us to remember who we are and what do we see in this. The first visual is that this is not a helpless situation, and we have what we have described as our prayers and meditations and our desires, and we understand that, and so we use them, our feelings and emotions in that direction as tools, and to help bring balance to this situation.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
I don't believe we have to bring balance. The balance is here. So
Okay.
this is what I'm saying. The change that we talked about is here. How so? Because the disparity between the assistance for Puerto Rico and Florida is going to change the hearts and minds of people because they're going to recognize it. And when they recognize it, the question becomes, so why are you making a difference? That's the change we're talking about.
Yeah.
The place where they recognize, they've seen it, but they're not recognized it. They're not embraced it. Our responsibility is to make sure that humanity is open to seeing the difference that they see brings about the change. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So that's where I see this. I see this as change itself. And there are those who listen who say, well, it happened with Trump. Yes, it did. It had been happening all the time, and there was no change. Well, there was no us either.
Yeah.
We did not have the understanding that we have now. That's what the difference is. The difference is we are the change. Our eyes see the disparity. Our eye sees the change. Does that make sense?
It not only makes sense,
Yes.
I think it is important that we recognize too that all of us on this line are not in the same place. We're all trying to get there. And I like when we end it on an upbeat, on something that is enlightening. These things have happened, but we are here now, and we are the change, and that's what we embrace. And all of this that we speak may not always be understood right away, but as we journey into these words and understanding, all of this will settle in, and we look back on it and say, yeah, now I see. I see who we are. I see what we do. And then there's these experiences that grow us even to higher depths. Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure we ended on something positive. But thank you.
No, thank you.
Are we good, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Look forward to tomorrow. You guys have a great Saturday, okay?
Thank you. You do as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.